Picture a grand English manor, Kingsless Hall, aglow with Christmas cheer, where a priceless ruby-encrusted pudding dish vanishes during a festive dinner. Hercule Poirot, the master detective, steps into a web of secrets, debts, and betrayal. When a guest is found stabbed in a locked chest, clutching a stolen ruby, the holiday turns deadly. Follow Poirot as he unravels hidden passages, cryptic clues, and tangled motives to uncover a killer and restore a family's honor in this gripping, Agatha Christie-style mystery. Chapter 1. The summons to Kingsless. Frost had painted delicate patterns on the windows of Hercule Poirot's London flat, and a fire crackled in the grate, casting a warm glow over the orderly room. Poirot, clad in a dressing gown of impeccable cut, sat at his mahogany desk, savoring a steaming cup of hot chocolate, its rich aroma mingling with the faint scent of polished wood. It was the morning of December 22nd, and the city outside hummed with the festive bustle of Christmas, a season Poirot regarded with a mixture of bemusement and appreciation for its orderliness when not disrupted by chaos. His valet, George, entered with a silver tray bearing the morning's post. Among the letters was one that caught Poirot's eye, an envelope of thick, cream-colored paper, addressed in a flowing, feminine hand. Breaking the wax seal, he extracted a letter from Mrs. Evelyn Lacey, of Kingsless Hall, Sussex. The script was elegant yet purposeful, each word chosen with care. Dear Monsieur Poirot, I trust this finds you well. My late husband, Sir Henry Lacey, often spoke of your remarkable talents in matters requiring discretion and intellect. I write to invite you to Kingsless Hall for our Christmas Eve gathering, where we shall display the Lacey family heirloom, a silver pudding dish adorned with rubies, a treasure of considerable historical and monetary value. Your presence would honor us, and I confess there is a delicate matter concern I dare not commit fully to paper that may benefit from your singular insight. I assure you of every comfort during your stay. Pray, do us the kindness of joining us. Yours sincerely. Evelyn Lacey. Poirot's neatly manicured fingers smoothed his mustache as his gray eyes gleamed with curiosity. A delicate matter hinted at a puzzle, and the mention of a ruby pudding dish piqued his interest further. He had heard of the Lacey heirloom, a medieval relic reputedly crafted for a Tudor banquet, its rubies said to glow like embers under candlelight. That Mrs. Lacey, a woman of refinement, should seek his aid suggested something amiss beneath the festive veneer. Mon Dieu, he murmured, a Christmas pudding with a secret, this is a dish worth tasting. He penned a reply, accepting the invitation, his precise handwriting mirroring the order of his thoughts. George was dispatched to post it, and Poirot turned to his wardrobe, selecting a suit of charcoal wool and a silk tie in muted green, festive, yet dignified. The journey to Sussex was arranged for the following day, a train to the village of Amberley, followed by a motor car to Kingsless Hall. As he packed, Poirot's mind turned to the possibilities. Theft, perhaps, or a family dispute over the heirloom. The human heart, he mused, it hides its motives, but not from Hercule Poirot. The next morning, the train steamed through a countryside blanketed in snow, the fields glistening under a pale winter sun. Poirot, wrapped in a greatcoat, gazed out at the passing hedgerows, his mind already assembling the pieces of an unseen puzzle. At Amberley Station, a chauffeur in a smart livery awaited, guiding him to a sleek Rolls-Royce. The drive to Kingsless Hall wound through frosted lanes, past copses of bare trees, until the manor emerged a Jacobean pile of red brick and tall chimneys, its windows aglow against the gathering dusk. Mrs. Evelyn Lacey greeted him at the door, a woman of 50 with silver-streaked hair and eyes that held both warmth and wariness. Her black velvet dress spoke of mourning, yet her posture was regal. Monsieur Poirot, you are most welcome, she said, her voice low but firm. I trust your journey was comfortable. Most satisfactory, Madame Poirot replied, bowing slightly. Your invitation, it intrigues me. This pudding dish, it is, perhaps, more than a mere ornament. Her lips tightened briefly, a shadow crossing her face. "You are perceptive, as expected. Come, let us join the others, and we shall speak later." She led him into a grand hall adorned with holly and ivy, where a fire roared in a vast hearth. A Christmas tree, bedecked with glass baubles, stood sentinel, and the air carried the scent of pine and mulled wine. Mrs. Lacey introduced her nephew, Mr. Colin Lacey, a handsome man of 30 with restless eyes and a smile that seemed to falter. "Delighted, Monsieur Poirot," Colin said, shaking his hand with a grip that lingered a fraction too long. The other guests, already assembled, turned to greet him. Miss Diana Vere, a novelist with a sharp jaw and sharper wit, appraised him. "Cooley, the famous detective," she said, her voice tinged with amusement. "I hope you find King's List more diverting than my novels." Mr. Arthur Brent, an antiques dealer with a florid face and jovial laugh, clapped Poirot on the shoulder, proclaiming his love for old treasures like the Lacey dish. Miss Lillian Gray, a botanist with mousy hair and a habit of glancing away, murmured a shy greeting. Major Harold Finch, a retired soldier with a stiff posture and clipped speech, nodded curtly, his eyes scanning the room, as if on parade. As they moved to the drawing room, Poirot's gaze fell upon the pudding dish, displayed in a locked glass case on a mahogany table. Its silver surface gleamed, the rubies catching the chandelier's light in a dance of crimson sparks. He noted the sturdy lock and the case's heavy base, designed to deter thieves. Yet something in Mrs. Lacey's glance, and in Colin's nervous pacing, told him the dish was already at the heart of a mystery. Dinner was announced, and as the guests filed out, Poirot lingered, his eyes sweeping the room. A faint draught stirred the curtains, and the scent of bergamot, subtle but distinct, reached his nostrils. He whispered to himself, "the game, it has begun." Little did he know that before the night was out, the pudding dish would vanish, and a darker secret would emerge from the shadows of Kingsless Hall. Chapter 2. The gathering at Kingsless Heath dusk had deepened into a velvet darkness as Hercule Poirot stepped from the Rolls-Royce onto the gravel drive of Kingsless Hall, his polished shoes crunching softly in the snow. The manor loomed before him, its Jacobean facade, a tapestry of red brick and leaded windows, each pane aglow with the promise of warmth and festivity. The air was sharp with frost, carrying the distant scent of wood smoke from the village of Amberley, nestled in the valley below. Poirot adjusted his scarf, his breath forming fleeting clouds, and followed the chauffeur through the great oak doors into the heart of the house. The entrance hall was a spectacle of Christmas splendor, its high ceiling adorned with a chandelier that cast prisms of light across polished oak paneling. Garlands of holly and ivy twined around the banisters of a grand staircase, and a towering fir tree, laden with silver tinsel and glass ornaments, stood sentinel near a roaring fire. The scent of pine mingled with the faint sweetness of spiced wine, warming on a sideboard. Poirot's keen eyes took in every detail: the gleam of the marble floor, the precise arrangement of the decorations, and the slight wear on the rug near the hearth, suggesting frequent passage. Order, he thought, but with an undercurrent of unease. Mrs. Evelyn Lacey awaited him, her figure framed by the firelight. She was a woman of striking presence, her silver-streaked hair swept into an elegant chignon, her black velvet gown a nod to mourning, yet tempered by a pearl brooch that spoke of resilience. Her eyes, a clear gray, held a warmth that did not quite mask a flicker of anxiety. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, extending a hand, "you are most welcome to Kingsless. I trust the journey was not too taxing." "Madame, it was a pleasure," Poirot replied, bowing with his customary precision. "The English countryside, it is most charming under its blanket of snow, and your hospitality, it promises to be impeccable." His voice was smooth, but his gaze lingered on her, noting the slight tension in her smile. The delicate matter mentioned in her letter, he surmised, was already casting its shadow. She led him through an arched doorway into the drawing room, where the other guests were gathered, their voices a low hum beneath the crackle of another fire. The room was a study in opulence. Crimson drapes framed tall windows, a Persian rug softened the floor, and gilt-framed portraits of stern lacy ancestors gazed down from the walls. At the room's center stood a mahogany table, upon which rested a locked glass case containing the famed pudding dish. The silver relic, intricately chased with vines and flowers, gleamed under the chandelier's glow, its rubies winking like drops of blood. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he studied it, noting the sturdy brass lock and the case's reinforced base, designed to thwart any but the most determined thief. Mrs. Lacey introduced her nephew, Mr. Colin Lacey, who emerged from a cluster of guests with a smile that was both charming and strained. He was a man of 30, tall and lean, with dark hair and eyes that darted restlessly, as if seeking an escape. His evening suit was well cut but slightly rumpled, and his handshake, though firm, betrayed a faint tremor. "Monsieur Poirot, what a coup for Aunt Evelyn to secure you," he said, his tone light, but his eyes avoiding Poirot's scrutiny. "I hope you're ready for a proper Christmas feast. None of your foreign nonsense here, eh?" Poirot's mustache twitched with amusement. "Monsieur Lacey, I assure you, I am most appreciative of the English traditions, particularly those involving a pudding of such distinction." His glance flicked to the dish, and Colin's smile faltered, his fingers tightening briefly on his glass of sherry. The other guests were summoned to meet the celebrated detective. Miss Diana Vere, a novelist whose sharp features and sharper tongue had made her a darling of literary circles, approached with a gleam in her hazel eyes. Her emerald gown shimmered as she moved, and her voice carried a hint of mockery. "Monsieur Poirot, I've read of your exploits," she said, tilting her head. "I trust you'll find Kingsless more intriguing than one of my thrillers. Though I warn you, we're a dull lot compared to your usual mysteries." Her smile was a challenge, and Poirot inclined his head, sensing a mind as calculating as his own. Mr. Arthur Brent, an antiques dealer with a florid complexion and a booming laugh, clapped Poirot on the shoulder with a familiarity that made the detective wince inwardly. "By Jove, the great Poirot!" Brent exclaimed, his voice carrying across the room. "I deal in old treasures myself. You know nothing like that pudding dish, mind you, but I'd give my eye teeth to have it in my shop. What a piece!" His enthusiasm seemed genuine, but Poirot noted the way Brent's eyes lingered on the glass case. Assessing rather than admiring, Miss Lillian Gray, a botanist with a slight frame and mousy brown hair, hovered at the edge of the group, her hands clasped nervously. Her plain gray dress and downcast eyes suggested timidity, but when she spoke, her voice was soft yet clear. "I'm honored to meet you, Monsieur Poirot," she said, glancing up briefly. "I study plants, not puzzles, but Kingsless has a fine orangery you might find interesting." Her hesitation intrigued Poirot. It was as if she had caught herself revealing too much. Major Harold Finch, a retired soldier with a ramrod's posture and a clipped mustache, offered a curt nod. His weathered face and steely gaze spoke of a life of discipline, and his evening attire was immaculate, though the cuffs showed faint signs of wear. "Poirot," he said, as if the name were a military rank. "Heard you're a man who sees things others miss. Good. We need sharp eyes in a place like this." His tone was gruff, and he turned away abruptly, as if dismissing further conversation. Mrs. Lacey guided Poirot to a chair near the fire, where a footman offered him a glass of mulled wine. He sipped it, savoring the warmth and spices, while his eyes roamed the room, cataloguing details: the heavy velvet curtains, the polished candelabra, the faint draught from a window imperfectly sealed. The pudding dish, he noted, was positioned so that it could be seen from every angle of the room, a centerpiece meant to dazzle and perhaps to tempt. He recalled Mrs. Lacey's letter, her veiled reference to a concern. Was it the dish itself, he wondered, or the people gathered around it? As the guests mingled, Poirot observed their interactions with the precision of a watchmaker. Colin Lacey hovered near his aunt, his laughter too loud, his gestures too animated, as if compensating for an inner turmoil. Diana Vere engaged Brent in a spirited debate about the value of historical artifacts, her words barbed yet delivered with a smile. Lillian Gray stood apart, her fingers tracing the leaves of a potted fern, her eyes flitting toward the glass case with an intensity that belied her shy demeanor. Major Finch, meanwhile, positioned himself near the door, his posture alert, as if guarding against an unseen threat. Mrs. Lacey drew Poirot aside, her voice low. "Monsieur Poirot, I must speak plainly, though not here," she said, glancing at the guests. "The pudding dish is not merely a treasure, but a symbol of our family's honor. There have been whispers of late, suggestions that it might be at risk. I cannot say more now, but after dinner, perhaps in the library." Her eyes searched his, and Poirot nodded, his curiosity sharpening. "Dinner is served," announced a butler, his voice resonant in the high-ceilinged room. The guests moved toward the dining hall, their chatter rising like a tide. Poirot followed, his small, precise steps contrasting with the broader strides of the others. The dining hall was no less grand, its long table set with silver and crystal, a centerpiece of holly and candles casting a warm glow. The menu promised a feast: roast goose, chestnut stuffing, and of course, a Christmas pudding, though Poirot suspected it would pale beside the silver relic in the drawing-room as they took their seats. Poirot noted the arrangement: Mrs. Lacey at the head, Colin to her right, Diana Vere to her left. Brent sat opposite Lillian Gray, who seemed to shrink under his boisterous anecdotes, while Major Finch, at the far end, surveyed the table like a general. The conversation turned to the pudding dish, with Brent expounding on its craftsmanship. "Tudor work, no doubt," he said, his eyes gleaming. "Those rubies pure as fire. Worth a king's ransom, I'd wager." "Worth more than money," Mrs. Lacey said sharply. "It's been in our family for centuries, a trust we guard." Her words were firm, but Poirot caught a tremor in her voice, and Colin's hand tightened on his fork. Diana Vere leaned forward, her smile sly. "Oh, but treasures like that attract trouble, don't they? Thieves, perhaps, or worse." Her gaze swept the table, lingering on Colin, who flushed and reached for his wine. Lillian Gray spoke softly, almost to herself. "It's beautiful, but heavy, somehow, like it carries a story." Her words drew a sharp look from Major Finch, who cleared his throat and changed the subject to the weather. Poirot listened, his mind cataloguing each tone, each glance. The dish, he sensed, was more than an heirloom. It was a catalyst, stirring hidden desires and fears. He noted the way Colin avoided his aunt's eyes, the way Diana's wit seemed to probe rather than entertain, the way Lillian's hands trembled as she spoke of stories. Major Finch's silence was as telling as Brent's verbosity, and Mrs. Lacey's composure masked a tension that Poirot could almost feel as the first course was served. A consomme fragrant with herbs. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden crash from the drawing-room, followed by a piercing cry. The guests froze, forks suspended, as Mrs. Lacey rose, her face pale. "The dish," she gasped, and the company surged toward the drawing-room, Poirot at their heels, his heart quickening with the thrill of the chase. They found the glass case shattered, its contents gone. The pudding dish had vanished, leaving only a scattering of glass and a single ruby, glinting on the rug like a drop of blood. The windows were closed, the snow outside undisturbed, and a faint scent of bergamot hung in the air. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he surveyed the scene, his gray cells worry. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "the pudding, it has been served, and with it, a mystery." The guests stood in stunned silence, their faces a gallery of shock, fear, and suspicion. Mrs. Lacey clutched the edge of the table, her composure fraying. Colin swore under his breath, his eyes darting to the door. Diana's lips curved in a faint, unreadable smile, while Brent's joviality vanished, replaced by a calculating frown. Lillian Gray's hands twisted together, and Major Finch's jaw tightened, his fists clenched at his sides. Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "Ms. Amos, remain where you are. The scene, it must not be disturbed. Madame Lacey, if you please, summon your staff. We shall begin at once." His gaze swept the room, missing nothing. The wax smudge on a shard of glass, the slight misalignment of the rug, the way the firelight danced on the ruby. The game he knew was afoot, and the truth, like a well-prepared pudding, would require careful stirring to reveal its secrets. Chapter 3. The theft. The crash from the drawing room had shattered the festive hum of Kingsless Hall, and the cry that followed, sharp home, almost animal in its urgency, propelled the guests from the dining table in a flurry of overturned chairs and clinking crystal. Hercule Poirot, his small frame moving with surprising swiftness, followed close behind Mrs. Evelyn Lacey, whose face had drained of color as she led the charge. The grand hall, moments ago a beacon of Christmas cheer, now seemed to close in around them, its holly garlands and flickering candles casting eerie shadows on the oak-paneled walls. They burst into the drawing room, where the scene confirmed Mrs. Lacey's gasped fear. The glass case that had housed the ruby-encrusted pudding dish lay in ruins, its thick panes reduced to jagged shards scattered across the mahogany table and Persian rug. The dish itself was gone, leaving only a void where its silver gleam and crimson jewels had held court. A single ruby, dislodged from its setting, glinted on the rug like a solitary ember, its presence both a taunt and a clue. The air held a faint, elusive scent of bergamot, sharp against the lingering warmth of the fire. Poirot's gray eyes swept the room, his mind a whirl of observation. The windows, tall and mullioned, were firmly shut, their latches undisturbed, and the snow beyond lay pristine, untouched by footprints. The heavy velvet curtains hung still, betraying no sign of a hasty exit. The chandelier above cast its steady glow, illuminating the wreckage but offering no immediate answers. Poirot knelt beside the table, his gloved fingers hovering over the glass shards, careful not to disturb them. A smudge of wax, barely visible, marred one fragment, and he noted its texture soft, as if recently applied. His gaze flicked to the ruby on the rug, its edges clean, suggesting it had been deliberately placed rather than torn free in a struggle. Mrs. Lacey stood frozen, one hand clutching the pearl brooch at her throat, her composure fraying like worn silk. "The dish," she whispered, her voice a mix of anguish and disbelief. "It's been in our family for generations gone." In a moment, her gray eyes, usually so steady, shimmered with unshed tears as she turned to Poirot. "Monsieur, you must help us. This is no mere theft. It's a wound to our honor." Colin Lacey, his face flushed from wine or agitation, pushed forward, his voice sharp. "This is outrageous. Who could have done this under our noses?" His eyes darted to the guests, lingering on Mr. Arthur Brent, who stood gaping at the shattered case, his jovial demeanor replaced by a furrowed brow. "You were awfully keen on that dish, Brent," Colin snapped, his tone accusing. Brent bristled, his florid cheeks reddening further. "Now, see here, young man. I'm an honest dealer, not a common thief. I'd have bought the thing fair and square if you'd sell." His indignation seemed genuine, but Poirot noted the way his hands fidgeted, smoothing his waistcoat repeatedly. Miss Diana Vere, her emerald gown catching the firelight, stepped closer to the wreckage, her lips curved in a faint, enigmatic smile. "How theatrical," she murmured, her voice carrying a trace of amusement. "A robbery during dinner, with all of us just steps away. It's like something from one of my novels." Her hazel eyes met Poirot's, and he sensed a challenge, as if she were testing the boundaries of his perception. Miss Lillian Gray, hovering near the fireplace, clasped her hands so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her mousy hair had slipped from its pins, and her gray dress seemed to blend into the shadows. "It's dreadful," she said softly, almost to herself. "That beautiful dish. It felt alive, somehow." Her words drew a sharp glance from Major Harold Finch, who stood rigid by the door, his steely gaze scanning the room as if expecting an ambush. "Enough gawking," Finch barked, his military tone cutting through the murmurs. "Someone's made off with it, and they're likely still in the house. We should search at once." His fists were clenched, and Poirot noted the faint tremor in his right hand, a detail that suggested more than mere anger. Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. "Ms. Amos, patience. To rush is to obscure the truth. The scene, it must remain untouched until we understand its language." He turned to Mrs. Lacey. "Madame, if you please, summon your butler and any staff who were near. We must establish who was where when the crash was heard." Mrs. Lacey nodded, her composure returning as she rang a bell. The butler, a stooped man named Hawkins with a face like weathered parchment, appeared promptly, followed by a young footman, Thomas, whose wide eyes betrayed his nerves. Hawkins confirmed that the staff had been in the kitchen or serving in the dining hall, save for Thomas, who had been fetching wine from the cellar. "I heard the crash, ma'am," Thomas stammered, "but I was below stairs. I saw nothing, I swear." Poirot's gaze settled on the footman, noting the sweat beading on his brow, despite the cool room. "And you, Monsieur Thomas, you passed through the hall on your way from the cellar. Did you see anyone near the drawing room?" Thomas swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. I thought I saw Miss Vere, sir, near the archway, but it was just a glimpse. I was in a hurry, you see." His voice faltered under Diana's cool stare. "Me?" Diana laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I was in the dining room, darling boy, charming Mr. Brent, with tales of my latest book. You must be mistaken." Her tone was light, but Poirot caught the way her fingers tightened on her fan, the feathers trembling slightly. Brent nodded vigorously. "She's right, Poirot. We were talking shop, couldn't have been anywhere else." Yet his eyes flicked to the shattered case, and Poirot sensed a calculation behind his bluster. Mrs. Lacey, her voice steady now, addressed the group. "We must continue the evening. The Christmas Eve dinner is a tradition, and I'll not let this outrage disrupt it further. Monsieur Poirot, will you join us? I trust you'll find the thief among us." Poirot inclined his head, his mustache curling slightly. "Madame, I shall dine, but my eyes, they will not rest. The truth, it hides in the small things, the glance, the gesture, the scent." His words hung in the air, and he saw Lillian Gray flinch, her gaze dropping to the floor. As the guests returned to the dining hall, Poirot lingered, his attention drawn to the room's details. The wax smudge on the glass suggested a tool, perhaps a candle used to soften the lock's mechanism. The ruby on the rug, so conspicuously placed, felt like a deliberate distraction, its clean edges at odds with the violence of the shattered case. The bergamot scent, faint but persistent, tugged at his memory. Perfume, perhaps, or something more specific. He stepped to the windows, confirming their latches were secure, then examined the rug, noting a slight disturbance in its pile, as if it had been shifted and hastily replaced. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced across the portraits of Lacey ancestors, their stern faces seeming to watch the unfolding drama. Poirot's mind whirred, assembling fragments. The timing of the crash, just as dinner began. The absence of external signs of intrigue. The tensions he had observed among the guests. Colin's agitation, Diana's cryptic amusement, Brent's sudden sobriety, Lillian's nervous reticence, Finch's martial alertness. Each was a piece of the puzzle, yet none fit perfectly. He rejoined the guests in the dining hall, where the mood was strained. The clink of cutlery and and forced conversation filling the silence. Mrs. Lacey presided with determined grace, urging the servants to serve the roast goose, its golden skin glistening under the candlelight. Colin drained his wine-glass, his eyes avoiding Poirot's. Diana leaned toward Lillian, whispering something that made the botanist blush and look away. Brent, attempting to reclaim his joviality, launched into a tale of a rare vase he'd acquired, but his laughter rang hollow. Finch sat ramrod straight, his fork moving with mechanical precision, his gaze fixed on some distant point. Poirot sipped his wine, his senses alert. The bergamot scent, he noted, was absent here, confined to the drawing-room. He observed the guest's hands. Colin's trembled slightly. Diana's were steady but poised. Lillian's were hidden in her lap. Brent's gestured expansively. Finch's gripped his utensils like weapons. The crash, Poirot reasoned, had been no accident. It was timed to exploit the moment when all were distracted by dinner. But who had the opportunity, and who the motive? As the servants cleared the plates, preparing for the pudding course, Poirot leaned toward Mrs. Lacey. "Madame, the dish, it was insured, oui?" he asked quietly. She nodded, her lips tight. "Yes, but its value is not merely financial. It's a symbol of our legacy, monsieur. My husband's dying wish was to preserve it." Her voice wavered, and Poirot saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. Not for the dish, he sensed, but for something deeper. The pudding was served, a flaming mound of richness that elicited murmurs of approval, but Poirot's thoughts remained in the drawing-room. The theft was bold, executed under the noses of a house full of guests and staff. The thief, he deduced, was either supremely confident or desperate, and the bergamot scent was a thread he must follow. "The little gray cells," he murmured to himself, "they will uncover the truth, hidden though it may be in this festive masquerade." The dinner continued, but the air was thick with suspicion, each guest a potential player in the drama of the missing pudding dish. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he savored the challenge, knowing that the night was far from over, and the secrets of Kingsless Hall were only beginning to unravel. Chapter 4. The initial inquiry. The dining hall of Kingsless Hall, with its flickering candles and polished silver, could not dispel the chill that had settled over the guests following the theft of the ruby-encrusted pudding dish. The Christmas Eve dinner continued under Mrs. Evelyn Lacey's determined hospitality, but the clatter of cutlery and forced pleasantries rang hollow. Hercule Poirot, seated near the head of the table, savored his portion of roast goose while his eyes, sharp as a hawk's, roamed over the company. Each guest, he knew, was a piece in the puzzle of the missing dish, and the solution lay in the subtle discord of their behaviors. As the servants cleared the plates and presented a flaming Christmas pudding, Poirot rose, his small frame commanding attention despite its unassuming stature. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice smooth but firm. "The theft of the pudding dish is a grave matter, but it is one that Hercule Poirot shall resolve. I ask that you remain in the dining hall while I examine the scene of the crime. Disturb nothing, if you please." His gaze lingered on Colin Lacey, whose flushed face betrayed agitation, and on Miss Diana Vere, whose faint smile suggested she found the affair more amusing than alarming. Mrs. Lacey nodded, her composure a fragile veneer. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot. Hawkins, assist him as needed." The butler, his weathered face impassive, bowed and followed Poirot back to the drawing-room, where the shattered glass case stood as a silent accusation. The drawing-room was quieter. Now, the fire's crackle, the only sound as Poirot began his meticulous inspection. The broken glass lay scattered across the mahogany table, glinting under the chandelier's light. He knelt, his gloved fingers hovering over a shard bearing. A smudge of wax, its texture soft and pliable, as if applied mere hours ago. "Curio," he murmured, noting its faint sheen. Nearby, the single ruby on the rug caught his eye, its placement too precise for an accident. He lifted it carefully, observing its clean edges, no sign of the violence that had shattered the case, a clue, or a deception? He mused, slipping the ruby into a handkerchief. Poirot's attention turned to the glass case itself. The lock, a sturdy brass mechanism, bore scratches around its keyhole, suggesting an attempt to force it. Yet the wax smudge hinted at a more subtle approach, perhaps a mold or tool softened by heat. He examined the table's surface, finding faint scratches beneath the case, as if it had been shifted slightly before the theft. The rug, too, showed a disturbance in its pile, a subtle ripple that suggested someone had adjusted it in haste. "The scene, it speaks," Poirot said to Hawkins, who stood watchfully by the door. "But it speaks in whispers." He moved to the windows, their latches secure, the snow beyond undisturbed. The heavy velvet curtains hung evenly, but Poirot's keen nose detected the lingering scent of bergamot, sharper here than in the dining hall. It was not the scent of a guest's perfume, he decided, but something more specific, pomade, perhaps, or a substance used in the theft. He filed the observation away, his gray cells humming with possibilities. Returning to the dining hall, Poirot requested a private room for interviews, and Mrs. Lacey directed him to the library, a cozy chamber, lined with leather-bound volumes and warmed by a small fire. A long table, flanked by high-backed chairs, offered a suitable stage for his inquiries. "Hawkins," Poirot said, "bring me the footman, Thomas, first. His glimpse of Miss Vere, it interests me." Thomas entered, his youthful face pale under the library's lamplight. He twisted his cap in his hands, his eyes darting to the shelves as if seeking escape. "Monsieur Thomas," Poirot began, his tone gentle but probing, "you said you saw Miss Vere near the drawing-room before the crash. Describe this moment, if you please, with precision." Thomas swallowed, his voice unsteady. "I was coming up from the cellar, sir, with a bottle of claret. I passed through the hall, and I saw her Miss Vere near the archway to the drawing-room. She was standing still, like she was listening. But it was dark, and I was in a rush, so I can't be sure." His words tumbled out, and Poirot noted the sweat on his brow, the way his fingers tightened on his cap. "And this was when, precisely?" Poirot pressed, his eyes fixed on the footman. "Just before the dinner bell, sir, maybe 10 minutes afore the crash. I didn't think nothing of it till now." Thomas's gaze dropped, and Poirot sensed a truth half-spoken. "Mercy, Thomas. You may go, but remain available." As the footman retreated, Poirot's thoughts turned to Diana Vere. Her denial had been swift, her manner almost playful. He summoned her next, and she entered the library with the grace of a cat, her emerald gown shimmering as she settled into a chair. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice laced with amusement, "am I to be interrogated like a villain in one of my novels? I assure you, I'm far too clever to be caught stealing." Her hazel eyes sparkled, but Poirot detected a wariness beneath her bravado. "Mademoiselle Vere," he replied, leaning forward, "the footman places you near the drawing room before the theft. Yet you claim to have been with Monsieur Brent, discussing your literary triumphs. Which is the truth?" Diana's smile widened, but her fingers tightened on her fan. "Thomas is a dear boy, but he's mistaken. I was with Arthur Brent, charming him with tales of my next book. The drawing-room. I had no reason to be there. I'm a writer, not a jewel thief." Her tone was light, but Poirot noted the way her eyes flicked to the door, as if gauging her exit. "And Monsieur Brent, he confirms this?" Poirot asked, his voice deceptively mild. "Of course," she said, waving a hand. "Ask him yourself. We were thick as thieves, pardon the pun, until the dinner bell rang." She laughed, but Poirot's gaze remained steady, and her laughter faded. He dismissed her and called for Arthur Brent, who entered with a forced joviality, his florid face glistening with perspiration. "Monsieur Poirot, this is a rum business," Brent said, sinking into the chair. "That dish worth a fortune, and now it's gone. I'd have paid good money for it, you know, but stealing, not my style." Poirot tilted his head. "Monsieur Brent, you were with Mademoiselle Vere at the time of the theft. We describe your conversation, if you please." Brent nodded eagerly. "Oh, we were in the dining room, chatting about her books. She's a sharp one, that Diana. Kept me entertained till we sat down to eat. Couldn't have been anywhere near the drawing room." His words were hearty, but Poirot noted a slight hesitation, a glance to the side that suggested rehearsal. "Merci, Monsieur Brent. You may return to the others." As Brent left, Poirot's thoughts turned to the alignment of their stories, too perfect, perhaps, for truth. He summoned Miss Lillian Gray next, curious about her quiet intensity. Lillian entered, her gray dress blending with the library's shadows, her hands clasped tightly. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "I don't know anything about the theft. I was in the dining room, waiting for dinner." Her voice was earnest, but her eyes avoided his, focusing on a point above his shoulder. "Mademoiselle Gray," Poirot said, his tone gentle, "you spoke of the pudding dish as alive, with a story. What did you mean by this?" Lillian blushed, her fingers twisting together. I only meant it's old, full of history. I study plants, not treasures, but I overheard Mr. Brent say it was Tudor, and I thought, it must have seen so much." Her words were halting, and Poirot noted the tremor in her hands, the way her gaze darted to the window. "And you were in the dining room when the crash was heard?" he asked. "Yes," she said quickly, "with everyone else." But her blush deepened, and Poirot sensed a secret, small but significant. He interviewed Major Harold Finch last. The soldier's stiff posture and clipped responses revealing little. "I was in the billiard room, smoking a cigar," Finch said. "Heard the crash, came running. No one passed me in the hall." His steely eyes met Poirot's without flinching, but Poirot noted the faint scent of tobacco on his clothes, mingled with something sharper, bergamot, perhaps. As Finch left, Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. The wax smudge, the ruby, the bergamot scent. The disturbed Ruggles pointed to a theft, planned with care, executed in a moment of distraction. The guests' alibis were interwoven, yet cracks appeared. Thomas's glimpse of Diana, Brent's rehearsed certainty, Lillian's nervous reticence, Finch's solitary cigar, and Colin Lacey, with his agitation and avoidance, remained a cipher. Poirot returned to the drawing room for a final look, his mind sifting details. The wax suggested a tool or key, the ruby a distraction, the bergamot a signature. The thief, he deduced, was among them, hiding behind a mask of festivity. "The little gray cells," he murmured, "they will find the thread that unravels this Christmas mystery." As he rejoined the guests, the pudding course concluded, and Mrs. Lacey's eyes met his, pleading for resolution. Poirot smiled faintly, knowing the truth was near, waiting to be uncovered like a jewel in the ashes. Chapter 5. Tangled Motives. The library of Kingsless Hall, with its shelves of leather-bound tomes and the soft glow of lamplight, provided Hercule Poirot a sanctuary for reflection as the Christmas Eve dinner drew to a close. The theft of the ruby-encrusted pudding dish had cast a pall over the festive gathering, and the guests, now sipping coffee and nibbling mince pies in the dining hall, wore their unease like ill-fitting masks. Poirot, seated at the library's long table, reviewed his notes, his neat handwriting cataloguing the wax smudge, the solitary ruby, the bergamot scent, and the disturbed rug. Each clue was a thread in a tapestry of deceit, and he sensed the motives behind the theft were as intricate as the dish's silver filigree. He had observed the guests closely during dinner, noting their interactions with the precision of a jeweler examining a gem. Colin Lacey's flushed agitation, Miss Diana Vere's sly amusement, Mr. Arthur Brent's forced joviality, Miss Lillian Gray's nervous reticence, and Major Harold Finch's steely reserve each suggested a hidden agenda. Mrs. Evelyn Lacey's plea for discretion hinted at a deeper family secret, and Poirot's gray cells hummed with the challenge of untangling the web of motives that bound them. He began with Colin Lacey, summoning the young man to the library. Colin entered, his dark hair disheveled, his evening suit rumpled as if he had been tugging at it. He sank into a chair, his fingers drumming on the armrest. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice edged with defiance, "I hope you're not thinking I had anything to do with this. That dish, it's Aunt Evelyn's pride, and I'd never touch it." Poirot tilted his head, his eyes keen. "Monsieur Lacey, your agitation, it is most pronounced. You are in financial distress, weak debts perhaps, from cards or horses." His tone was gentle but probing, and Colin's flush deepened. "How did you—" Colin caught himself, his jaw tightening. "Yes, I've had some bad luck at the tables, but I'd never steal from my own family. Besides, I was in the dining room when it happened. You saw me." His voice rose, and Poirot noted the way his eyes darted to the door, as if seeking escape. "And yet," Poirot said, "you argued with Monsieur Brent earlier this evening, did you not? About the pudding dish, perhaps." Colin's fingers stilled. "Brent was pestering Aunt Evelyn to sell it. Said he could get a fortune for it. I told him to leave her alone. It's our legacy, it's our legacy." His words were fervent, but Poirot detected a tremor, a hint of something unspoken. "Mercy, Monsieur Lacey, you may go." As Colin left, Poirot jotted a note: debts, resentment toward Brent, opportunity uncertain. The young man's passion for the family's honor was convincing, but passion, Poirot knew, could mask darker impulses. Next he called for Miss Diana Vere, who entered with a sway of her emerald gown, her hazel eyes glinting with amusement. She settled into the chair, crossing her arms with a theatrical air. "Monsieur Poirot, you're wasting your talents on this little drama," she said, her voice light but sharp. "I'm a writer, not a thief. My crimes are confined to the page." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Mademoiselle Vere, your wit, it is charming, but it conceals. The footman saw you near the drawing-room before the theft, and you have a history with Monsieur Lacey Nan. A broken engagement, perhaps." Diana's smile faltered, her fingers tightening on her fan. "You've done your homework, haven't you?" "Yes, Colin and I were engaged, briefly, 2 years ago. It ended badly. He's a charming fool, but a fool nonetheless. As for the drawing room, Thomas is mistaken. I was with Brent, as I told you." Her tone was defiant, but Poirot noted the slight flush on her cheeks, the way her eyes avoided his. "And this history with Monsieur Lacey," Poirot pressed, "it gives you no reason to harm his family's legacy." Diana laughed, a brittle sound. "Harm? I'd rather write a novel about it than steal it. Besides, I've no use for rubies, they clash with my wardrobe." She rose, her movements graceful but deliberate, and Poirot sensed a mind calculating every word. "Mr. Arthur Brent was next, his florid face glistening as he entered, his joviality strained. "Monsieur Poirot, this is a bad business," he said, wiping his brow with a handkerchief. "That dish was a masterpiece worth a king's ransom. I'd have paid handsomely, but stealing, not my game." Poirot leaned forward. "Monsieur Brent, you spoke of buying the dish. Yet Monsieur Lacey says you pressured Madame Lacey, and you confirm Mademoiselle Vere's alibi. Tell me of your movements before dinner." Brent nodded, his hands fidgeting. "I was with Diana in the dining room, talking about her books. She's a clever lass, full of stories. Before that, I was in the hall, admiring the Christmas tree. Didn't go near the drawing room, too busy enjoying the mulled wine." His laugh was forced, and Poirot noted the handkerchief, slightly stained, as if it had been used to wipe something other than sweat. "And your interest in the dish," Poirot said. "It was purely professional." "Of course," Brent exclaimed. "I'm an antiques dealer, Poirot. I know value when I see it. But I'd never steal bad for business." His eyes flicked to the side, and Poirot marked the gesture as one of unease. Miss Lillian Gray entered. Next, her gray dress blending with the library's shadows, her hands clasped tightly. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't know anything about the theft. I was in the dining room, like everyone else." Her eyes darted to the window, and Poirot noted the faint tremble in her fingers. "Mademoiselle Gray," he said gently, "you know the estate well. The orangery, the gardens, perhaps passages others do not know. And this bergamot scent, it is familiar to you, perhaps, from your botanical studies." Lillian's blush deepened, her hands twisting together. I study plants, yes. The orangery has rare specimens, and I've explored the grounds. But passages, I don't know what you mean. As for bergamot, it's common in oils and perfumes. I might have some in my work, but I didn't bring it here." Her words were rushed, and Poirot saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. "Merci, mademoiselle, you have been most helpful." As she left, Poirot added to his notes, knowledge of estate. Possible access to bergamot, nervous demeanor. Her reticence suggested more than shyness, perhaps a secret tied to the house itself. Major Harold Finch was the last to enter. His posture rigid, his steely eyes meeting Poirot's without hesitation. "I've nothing to hide, Poirot," he said, his voice clipped. "I was in the billiard room, smoking a cigar, when I heard the crash. Came straight to the drawing room. Saw no one in the hall." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "Major Finch, you are a man of discipline, yet you watch the others like a sentinel. You spoke of sharp eyes being needed here. Why?" Finch's jaw tightened. "This house sits full of secrets. I've known the Lacys for years, served with Evelyn's husband in the war. That dish is their pride, and someone's betrayed them. I don't trust Brent, too eager to get his hands on it, or that Vere woman, she's too clever by half." His words were blunt, but Poirot noted the faint scent of bergamot on his clothes, masked by tobacco. As Finch left, Poirot leaned back, his mind sifting the tangle of motives. Colin's debts and resentment toward Brent suggested a desperate man, yet his loyalty to his aunt seemed genuine. Diana's past with Colin and her quick wit hinted at a personal vendetta, but her alibi with Brent was too convenient. Brent's obsession with the dish and his evasive manner pointed to greed. Yet his story aligned with Diana's. Lillian's knowledge of the estate and her nervous reaction to bergamot raised questions, while Finch's vigilance and the scent on his clothes suggested a deeper involvement. Poirot rose, returning to the drawing room for a final inspection. He examined the rug again, lifting its edge to reveal a faint scuff on the floorboard, as if something heavy had been dragged. The wax smudge, the ruby, the bergamotol, pointed to a theft planned with precision, executed in the chaos of the dinner bell. But the motives, he sensed, were not singular. Was it greed, revenge, or something more personal? As he rejoined the guests now gathered in the hall for after-dinner drinks, Mrs. Lacey approached, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, have you found anything?" she asked, her voice low. "Madame," he replied, his eyes gleaming, "I have found threads. But not yet the pattern. The truth, it is like a Christmas pudding, rich, complex, and hidden beneath the surface. But fear not, Hercule Poirot will uncover it." His words were confident, but as he surveyed the guest Scollon's restless pacing, Diana's sly glance, Brent's forced smile, Lillian's withdrawn silence, Finch's watchful stance, he knew the mystery was deepening, and the night held more secrets yet to be revealed. Chapter 6. The locked chest. The clock in the grand hall of Kingsless Hall struck midnight. its chimes echoing through the snow-muffled silence of the Sussex night. The guests, their nerves frayed by the theft of the ruby-encrusted pudding dish, had retired to their rooms, leaving Hercule Poirot alone in the library, his notebook open before him. The fire had dwindled to embers, casting a faint glow over his meticulous notes: the wax smudge, the solitary ruby, the bergamot scent, the disturbed rug, the scuff on the floorboard. Each clue pointed to a carefully orchestrated theft, but the tangle of motives, Colin's debts, Diana's past, Brent's greed, Lillian's secrets, Finch's vigilance remained unresolved. Poirot's gray cells hummed, sensing the puzzle was about to deepen. A sharp knock at the library door startled him. Hawkins, the butler, entered, his weathered face taut with alarm. "Monsieur Poirot, sir, you must come at once. There's been a terrible discovery in the orangery." His voice, usually steady, trembled, and Poirot rose, his small frame radiating urgency. "Lead the way, Monsieur Hawkins," Poirot said, slipping his notebook into his pocket. The butler guided him through the darkened hall, past the Christmas trees' fading glow, and out a side door into the frosted night. The air was biting, the snow crunching underfoot as they crossed the grounds to the orangery. A glass-walled structure nestled among bare yews. A lantern bobbed in the distance, held by a groundskeeper, Mr. Ellis, whose weathered face was pale under his cap. "It's in there, sir," Ellis said, his voice hoarse. "I was checking the heaters, didn't expect this." He gestured to a heavy oak chest, its carved surface glinting in the lantern's light, positioned against the orangery's far wall. The chest, large enough to hold a man, was bolted shut from the inside, its iron latch gleaming ominously. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he approached, noting the undisturbed snow around the orangery, the frost on the glass panes unbroken by forced entry. "Open it, if you please," he said, his voice calm but firm. Ellis hesitated, then fetched a crowbar, his hands trembling as he pried at the latch. The bolt gave way with a groan, and the lid creaked open, revealing a sight that made Hawkins gasp and Ellis step back. Mr. Arthur Brent lay inside, his florid face now ashen, his eyes staring blankly at the glass ceiling. A dagger protruded from his chest, its handle simple but sturdy, and blood had pooled beneath him, staining his evening suit. In his right hand, clenched in a death grip, was a ruby from the pudding dish, its crimson facets catching the lantern's light. The air held a faint trace of bergamot, sharp against the earthy scent of the orangery's plants. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his gaze sweeping the scene. "The chest, it is not merely a coffin, it is a stage." He knelt beside the chest, careful not to disturb the body, and examined the interior. The wood was splintered near the latch, suggesting force from within, yet the bolt had been secured. An impossibility, unless someone had locked it after Brent's death, or unless Brent himself had done so, a notion Poirot dismissed as absurd. A faint scratch on the inner lid caught his eye, as if a tool had been used to manipulate the bolt. He rose, turning to Ellis. "Monsieur Ellis, when did you find this?" "Just now, sir," the groundskeeper replied, his voice unsteady. "I came to check the heaters at midnight, like always. Saw the chest, never noticed it here before. Thought it odd, so I looked closer." His eyes darted to the body, and he shuddered. "And you saw no one else?" Poirot pressed. "No, sir. The snow's untouched, and the door was locked when I arrived. Had to use my key." Ellis's words were earnest, and Poirot noted the keyring at his belt, its metal glinting. Poirot turned to Hawkins. "Summon Inspector Dawes from Amberley at once, and gather the household in the drawing-room discreetly, if you please. No one must leave." Hawkins nodded and hurried off, leaving Poirot alone with Ellis, who stood frozen, clutching his lantern. The detective circled the chest, his mind racing. The absence of footprints in the snow ruled out an outsider, and the locked door suggested the killer was within the house. The ruby in Brent's hand, like the one in the drawing room, felt staged, a deliberate echo of the theft. The bergamot scent, now a recurring thread, tugged at Poirot's memory had he detected it on one of the guests. He examined the orange, its rows of citrus trees and exotic plants bathed in moonlight. A trellis near the chest caught his attention, its vines slightly askew, as if disturbed. Behind it, a faint outline in the wall suggested a panel, but it was sealed, its edges flush with the stone. Inspector Dawes arrived within the hour, a stout man with a bristling mustache and a no-nonsense air. He surveyed the scene, his face grim. "Nasty business, Monsieur Poirot," he said, scratching his chin. A locked chest, bolted from the inside, and a man stabbed through the heart. "How's it done, eh?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The how, Inspector, is but a step too. The why, the chest, it speaks of a killer who wishes to confound us. But Hercule Poirot is not so easily misled." He pointed to the splintered wood and the scratch on the lid. The bolt was manipulated, perhaps with a tool, to create this illusion of impossibility. "We must learn who had access to this chest and to a dagger." Dawes nodded, directing his constable to guard the scene, while Poirot returned to the drawing room, where the guests had gathered, their faces a gallery of shock and suspicion. Mrs. Lacey stood by the fireplace, her hands clasped tightly, her composure strained. Colin Lacey paced, his eyes wild, a glass of brandy trembling in his hand. Miss Diana Vere sat poised, her emerald gown stark against the room's crimson drapes, her expression unreadable. Miss Lillian Gray huddled in a chair, her face pale, her fingers twisting a handkerchief. Major Harold Finch stood by the door, his posture rigid, his gaze fixed on the shattered glass case. Poirot addressed them, his voice cutting through the tension. "Mesdames et messieurs, a tragedy has occurred. Monsieur Brent has been found dead in the orangery, stabbed in a locked chest, a ruby from the pudding dish in his hand. I must know your movements after dinner. Speak truthfully, for the truth, it will reveal itself." Mrs. Lacey gasped, her hand rising to her mouth. "Dead. Arthur Brent, but how, why?" Her voice broke, and Poirot saw genuine grief in her eyes, though whether for Brent or the mounting scandal, he could not yet tell. Colin stopped pacing, his face ashen. "Brent, stabbed. Good God, this is madness." His brandy spilled, and Poirot noted the tremor in his hand, more pronounced now. Diana Vere raised an eyebrow, her voice cool. "A locked chest. How delightfully Gothic. I was in my room, writing notes for my next book. Alone, I'm afraid no alibi to offer." Her smile was faint, but Poirot caught the flicker of her eyes toward Colin. Lillian Gray's voice was barely audible. "I was in the conservatory, checking on a fern. I didn't see anyone." Her hands twisted the handkerchief, and Poirot recalled her knowledge of the estate, her possible link to Bergamot. Finch spoke brusquely. "I was in the billiard room, finishing my cigar. Heard nothing, saw nothing. This is a damned mess." His jaw clenched, and Poirot noted the faint scent of tobacco on him. But no bergamot this time. Poirot turned to Mrs. Lacey. "Madame, this chest, where was it kept?" "In the attic," she replied, her voice steadying. "It's an old family piece, used for storage. I can't imagine how it got to the orangery." Her eyes met Poirot's, pleading for answers. He nodded, his mind sifting the new clues: the locked chest, the ruby, the bergamot, the trellis. Brent's death was no random act, it was tied to the theft, a second act in a carefully scripted drama. The killer, he deduced, had planned both crimes to deflect suspicion, but the ruby and bergamot were mistakes. Threads that would lead to the truth. As Dawes joined them, taking statements, Poirot slipped back to the orangery, his lantern casting shadows among the plants. He examined the trellis again, pressing the wall behind it. A faint click revealed a hidden panel, its edges cunningly disguised. It led to a narrow passage, damp and cobwebbed, stretching toward the house. Voila, Poirot whispered, the killer's path. The passage, he reasoned, connected the orangery to the drawing room, explaining the absence of footprints. Returning to the drawing room, Poirot faced the guests, his eyes gleaming. The chest, it was a deception, but the truth, it emerges. Someone among us knows this house too well, its secrets, its passages, the little gray cells, they will find you. His words hung in the air, and he saw Lillian flinch, Colin's hand tighten, Diana's smile waver. The night was far from over, and the mystery of the pudding dish had taken a deadly turn. Chapter 7. The alibis crumbled. The drawing room of Kingsless Hall, once a beacon of festive warmth, now felt like a stage for suspicion, its crimson drapes and flickering firelight casting long shadows over the gathered guests. The discovery of Mr. Arthur Brent's body in the locked chest, a ruby from the stolen pudding dish clutched in his lifeless hand, had escalated the theft into a tragedy. Hercule Poirot stood near the shattered glass case, his small frame radiating authority as he faced the household. The air was thick with tension, the guests' faces a gallery of unease. Mrs. Evelyn Lacey's strained composure, Colin Lacey's restless agitation, Miss Diana Vere's enigmatic calm, Miss Lillian Gray's trembling reticence, and Major Harold Finch's steely vigilance. Inspector Dawes, his notebook open, scribbled furiously. But Poirot's gray cells were already weaving a pattern from the clues, the wax smudge, the bergamot scent, the hidden passage, and now, the impossible locked chest. Poirot's voice cut through the silence, precise and measured. Madame et Messieurs, the death of Monsieur Brent is no mere accident, it is tied to the theft of the pudding dish. Your alibis, they are like a house of cards, fragile and ready to fall. I ask again, where were you after dinner, and what did you see? The truth, it will not hide forever. Mrs. Lacey, standing by the fireplace, her pearl brooch glinting, spoke first, her voice steady but strained. Monsieur Poirot, I was in the hall, speaking with Hawkins about the evening's arrangements. I heard no one approach the orangery. Her gray eyes met his, pleading for resolution. But Poirot noted the way her hands clasped tightly, betraying her fear of scandal. Colin Lacey, his brandy glass now empty, ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I told you, I was in my room. Changing my tight was too tight. I didn't go near the orangery. His voice cracked, and Poirot observed the sweat on his brow, the way his eyes avoided his aunt's. Brent was a vulture, circling the dish, but I didn't kill him. The outburst drew a sharp glance from Major Finch, and Poirot filed away Colin's defensiveness. Miss Diana Vere leaned back in her chair, her emerald gown catching the firelight, her smile faint but unyielding. As I said, I was in my room, scribbling notes for my novel. Murder and theft, perfect inspiration. Wouldn't you agree, Monsieur Poirot? Her tone was playful, but her fingers toyed with her fan, and Poirot caught a flicker of calculation in her hazel eyes. I saw no one, heard nothing except that dreadful crash earlier. Miss Lillian Gray, her gray dress blending with the shadows, clutched her handkerchief, her voice barely audible. I was in the conservatory, as I said, checking a fern. I didn't know about the chest until Mr. Ellis found it. Her eyes darted to the floor, and Poirot noted the tremor in her hands, the way she avoided mentioning the orangery directly. Major Finch, standing rigid by the door, spoke with clipped precision. I was in the billiard room, finishing my cigar, as I told you. No one passed me, and I didn't go near the orangery. This is a disgrace to the Lacey name. His jaw clenched, and Poirot detected a note of personal affront in his tone, as if the crime were an attack on his own honor. Poirot's gaze swept the room, his mind sifting their words. The alibis were consistent yet brittle, like glass ready to crack under pressure. He turned to Inspector Dawes, who was rubbing his mustache, his face a mix of frustration and deference. "Inspector, have your men searched the orangery and the passage I discovered?" Dawes nodded. "I'm Monsieur Poirot. The passage leads to a back stair near the drawing room, hidden behind a panel. No footprints, but some dust disturbed, like someone passed through recently. As for the chest, it's old heavy taken strength to move it. We're checking for fingerprints, but it's clean so far." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Clean, you say? That is most interesting. A killer who wipes away traces is a killer who plans." He turned back to the guests, his voice soft but commanding. "Let us test these alibis. Mademoiselle Vere, you claim to have been writing, yet Thomas saw you near the drawing room before the theft. And now, you were alone after dinner. Convenient." "Nan," Diana's smile tightened, her fan snapping shut. "Thomas is a nervous boy, prone to mistakes. I was in my room, as I said. You'll find my notebook there, with fresh ink." Her defiance was polished, but Poirot noted the way her eyes flicked to Colin, as if gauging his reaction. He turned to Lillian. "Mademoiselle Gray, you were in the conservatory, yet the orangery is but steps away. And this bergamot scent, botanical work, it involves such oils." Lillian's face paled, her handkerchief twisting into knots. Yes, I use bergamot in my studies, but I didn't bring it here. I was checking a fern, that's all. I didn't see Mr. Brent." "Or the chest." Her voice rose, and Poirot saw tears in her eyes, a sign of fear rather than guilt. He sensed aught to Colin. He said, "Monsieur Lacey, your tie, it was too tight, you say. Yet you were quick to accuse Monsieur Brent of coveting the dish. Did you follow him after dinner, perhaps to confront him?" Colin's face reddened. "I didn't follow him. I was in my room, I swear. Yes, I hated Brent's scheming. He wanted to strip us of our heritage, but I didn't kill him." His fists clenched, and Poirot noted the desperation in his voice. The mark of a man cornered by circumstance. Finch, unprompted, interjected. "I saw Miss Gray heading toward the conservatory after dinner. She looked furtive, if you ask me." His tone was accusatory, and Lillian gasped, her eyes wide. "I wasn't furtive," she protested. "I was checking my plants, it's my work." Her voice broke, and Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "Enough," he said. "The alibis, they crumble under scrutiny. But there is more. The chest, it was locked from within, yet the splintered wood and the scratch suggest a trick. Someone moved it to the orangery, someone who knew the passage." His gaze lingered on Lillian, then Finch. "And the bergamot is a thread that ties the theft to the murder." He stepped to the shattered glass case, picking up a shard with the wax smudge. "This wax, it was used to tamper with the lock, perhaps to make a mold. And the ruby in Monsieur Brent's hand, it matches the one left here, a deliberate clue to mislead." He turned to Dawes. "Inspector, have you examined the dagger?" Dawes nodded. "Plain, no markings. Could belong to anyone. Found no prints, but we're checking the house for similar blades." Poirot's mind raced. The passage explained the lack of footprints, but the chest's internal bolt was a puzzle. He recalled the hidden panel in the orangery, the disturbed dust. Someone had used the passage to move the chest, perhaps to stage Brent's death as an impossible crime. But why? To protect the dish, to frame another, or to settle a personal score? He addressed the group again. "I will search your rooms. With Inspector Dawes, to find traces of wax, bergamot, or the dagger. If you are innocent, you will not object." His tone brooked no argument, and Mrs. Lacey nodded, her face pale but resolute. The searches began, starting with Colin's room. Poirot found a crumpled letter under his bed, addressed to a creditor, demanding payment by year's end. "Your debts," "They weigh heavily," Poirot said, and Colin's shoulders slumped. But he offered no confession. In Diana's room, her notebook lay open, the ink fresh as she claimed. But Poirot noticed a smudge of wax on her dressing table. Too faint to be conclusive. "You are careful, mademoiselle," he said. And her smile was unreadable. Lillian's room held a small vial of bergamot oil, labeled for her botanical experiments. "It's for my work," she stammered, tears welling. "I didn't use it for anything else." Poirot noted the vial's seal was intact, but her panic was telling. Finch's room revealed a cigar case and a set of military knives, none matching the murder weapon. The scent of tobacco was strong, masking any trace of bergamot. "I'm a soldier, Poirot," Finch said. "I don't play games with daggers." His eyes were hard, but Poirot sensed a guarded truth. Brent's room, searched last, held a surprise. A notebook detailing offers for the pudding dish, with figures far below its worth. He sought to buy low, Poirot murmured, but did he plan to steal? As the searches concluded, Poirot returned to the drawing room, his mind worry. The alibis were fraying, the clues mounting. The bergamot linked Lillian, but her fears seemed genuine. Colin's debts and Diana's past suggested motives, but their stories held for now. Finch's vigilance and Brent's greed pointed to a clash, but the locked chest remained the key. "The truth," Poirot said to Dawes, "it hides in the mechanics of this chest and the secrets of this house. Tomorrow we will unravel them." The guests dispersed, their faces etched with dread, and Poirot stood alone, the ruby in his pocket, a weighty reminder. The mystery had deepened, but the little gray cells were closing in on the killer's trail. Chapter 8. The hidden passage. The first light of Christmas morning crept through the frosted windows of Kingsless Hall, casting a pale glow over the snow-laden grounds. The festive cheer that should have marked the day was stifled by the shadow of murder and theft. The ruby-encrusted pudding dish, still missing, and Mr. Arthur Brent's body lying cold in the orangery's locked chest. Hercule Poirot, having slept little, stood in the drawing-room, his eyes fixed on the shattered glass case. The clues, the wax smudge, the bergamot scent, the solitary rubies, the disturbed rug. The hidden passage formed a mosaic in his mind, each piece sharp but not yet complete. The locked chest, with its internal bolt and splintered wood, was a deliberate riddle, and Poirot's gray cells thrummed with the challenge of solving it. He had risen early, slipping from his room before the household stirred, to revisit the orange. The glass-walled structure stood serene in the dawn, its citrus trees and exotic ferns bathed in a soft light. The oak chest, now cordoned off by Inspector Dawes's constable, loomed like a grim sentinel. Poirot approached it, his gloved hands tracing the splintered wood near the latch. The scratch on the inner lid, faint but deliberate, suggested a tool had manipulated the bolt, creating the illusion of an impossible crime. He turned to the trellis he had noted the previous night, its vines slightly askew, pressing the wall. Behind it, he confirmed the hidden panel, its edges cunningly blended with the stone. The narrow passage beyond, damp and cobwebbed, stretched toward the house, a secret artery in the manor's ancient bones. Poirot followed the passage, his lantern casting flickering shadows. It wound through the foundations, emerging behind a panel near the drawing-room's fireplace. Dust on the floor showed recent disturbance footprints, faint but unmistakable, too small for a man's boots. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "the thief. They are clever, but not invisible." He examined the panel's mechanism, a simple latch hidden in the woodwork, easily missed by an untrained eye. The passage explained the absence of footprints in the snow, but the footprints within suggested someone familiar with the house's secrets. Returning to the drawing-room, Poirot studied the fireplace panel, noting a faint scuff on the hearthstone, as if something heavy had been dragged through. The rug's disturbance, he realized, was no accident. It concealed the panel's use. He knelt, his fingers brushing the rug's edge, and found a trace of wax matching the smudge on the glass case. The wax, the passage, the bergamot, he said softly. They weave a net, and the guilty, they will be caught. He summoned Inspector Dawes to the drawing room, the stout policeman arriving with a weary air, his mustache bristling. Monsieur Poirot, any progress? Dawes asked, his notebook at the ready. This locked chest business is baffling my men. No prints, no tracks, and that dagger common as dirt could have come from any kitchen. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Inspector, the chest is a trick, but the passage, it is the key. It connects the orangery to this room, allowing the killer to move unseen. The footprints, they are small, perhaps a woman's. We must question those who know the house best. He gestured to the panel, and Dawes's eyes widened as he tested the latch. By Jove, a secret passage, Dawes exclaimed. This changes things, but who'd know about it? Someone intimate with Kingsless. Poirot replied. Let us speak with Mademoiselle Gray. She studies the estate's plans and may know its secrets. Lillian Gray was summoned, her gray dress as muted as her demeanor, her hands twisting a handkerchief as she entered. Her mousy hair was pinned tightly, but her eyes, red-rimmed, betrayed a sleepless night. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice a whisper, I've told you all I know. I was in the conservatory, not the orangery. I didn't kill Mr. Brent. Poirot's tone was gentle but firm. Mademoiselle Gray, you know the groundswell, the orangery, the conservatory, and perhaps the passages hidden within these walls. Tell me of this panel near the fireplace. Lillian's face paled, her hands trembling. A passage I've heard stories, old tales of priest holes from Tudor times, but I've never seen one. Her voice rose, and Poirot noted the way. Her eyes darted to the fireplace, as if drawn against her will. And yet, he said, footprints in the passage are small, like yours, and the bergamot scent, it clings to you, Nan. Your vial, it was sealed, but perhaps another was used. He stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. Tears welled in Lillian's eyes. I swear, I didn't use bergamot here. Yes, I know the estate have studied its plants for months, and Mrs. Lacey let me explore. But I didn't know about any passage. Her voice broke, and Poirot saw genuine fear, but also a flicker of something else, knowledge, perhaps withheld. Out of loyalty or fear. Mercy, mademoiselle, he said, dismissing her. As she left, he turned to Dawes. She knows more than she says, but she is not our killer. The fear, it is not of guilt, but of discovery. Next, he called for Mrs. Lacey, who entered with a regal air, her black velvet gown, pristine despite the hour. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice steady, this passage, you believe it key to the crime? Oui, Madame. Poirot replied. It allowed the thief and killer to move unseen. Who in this house knows of such secrets? Mrs. Lacey's lips tightened. The manor is old, full of hidden corners. My husband spoke of passages used in the Civil War, but I thought them legend. Only the family and, perhaps, old staff like Hawkins would know. Her eyes clouded, and Poirot sensed a reluctance to betray her home's secrets. And Mademoiselle Gray, he asked. She has explored the estate. Did she ever mention such passages? Mrs. Lacey hesitated. Lillian is a guest, here for her botanical work. She's been in the orangery often, but she never spoke of passages. I trusted her. Her voice wavered, and Poirot noted the weight of her words' trust. Now strained by doubt, he turned to call in Lacey, who entered with a scowl, his brandy-fueled bravado gone. Monsieur Lacey, Poirot said, you grew up in this house. The passages, they were part of your boyhood games, Nan. Colin's eyes narrowed. What are you implying? Yes, I knew of a passage or two, childhood hide-and-seek, that's all, but I didn't use them to steal or kill. I was in my room, as I said. His voice was defiant, but Poirot saw the sweat on his brow. the way his hands clenched, and Monsieur Brent Poirot pressed. "You argued with him over the dish. Did you know he planned to take it?" Colin's face reddened. He was a greedy sod, always pushing Aunt Evelyn to sell. "I told him to back off, but I didn't kill him." His voice cracked, and Poirot noted the desperation. A man teetering on the edge of ruin. Diana Vere was next, her emerald gown a stark contrast to the library's somber tones. "A secret passage," she said, her voice laced with amusement. "How delightfully melodramatic. I'm afraid I know nothing of such things. I write mysteries, not live them." Her smile was coy, but Poirot caught the flicker in her eyes, as if she were assessing his next move. "And yet," he said, "you were seen near the drawing-room before the theft. Could you have stumbled upon this passage, perhaps by chance?" Diana laughed, a brittle sound. "Stumbled? I'm not so clumsy, Monsieur Poirot. I was with Brent, then in my room. If there's a passage, ask someone who knows this pile of stones, like Lillian or Colin." Her deflection was smooth, but Poirot noted the way her fan snapped shut, a sign of tension. Major Finch entered last, his posture rigid, his eyes hard. "Passages," he said brusquely. "Heard of them, never seen them. Old houses like this are riddled with such things. I was in the billiard room, as I said. This is a waste of time." His tone was dismissive, but Poirot detected a faint tremor in his hand. A crack in his military facade. Poirot returned to the orangery with Dawes, examining the passage's exit. The footprints, small and light, matched Lillian's shoes, but their pattern suggested hesitation, not purpose. "She was here," Poirot said, "but not to kill. She discovered the passage, perhaps by accident, and someone else used it." He traced the passage back to the drawing-room, finding a trace of bergamot near the fireplace panel, confirming its use in the theft. As he stood in the drawing-room, the shattered case glinting in the morning light, Poirot's mind wove the clues together. The passage linked the crimes, the wax and bergamot pointed to a meticulous plan, and the rubies were a distraction. Lillian's knowledge of the estate made her a key, but her fear suggested she was a witness, not a culprit. Colin's debts, Diana's cunning, Finch's vigilance each held a piece of the truth. But the locked chest's mechanism remained the heart of the mystery. He turned to Dawes. "Inspector, we must find the tool that locked the chest, a wire, perhaps, or a thin blade. And we must watch Mademoiselle Gray. She knows more than she tells, and the killer, they fear her knowledge." As the household stirred, preparing for a subdued Christmas breakfast, Poirot's eyes gleamed. The net was tightening, and the truth, like a hidden passage, was about to be revealed. Chapter 9. The motive revealed. The pale light of Christmas morning filtered through the frosted windows of Kingsless Hall, but the festive spirit was buried beneath a pall of suspicion and grief. The theft of the ruby-encrusted pudding dish and the murder of Mr. Arthur Brent in the locked chest had transformed the manor into a stage for a grim drama. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his notebook open, its pages filled with meticulous observations. The wax smudge, the bergamot scent, the solitary rubies, the disturbed rug, the hidden passage, the splintered chest. Each clue was a stepping stone, and Poirot's gray cells were now poised to leap toward the truth. The discovery of the secret passage from the orangery to the drawing-room had narrowed the field, but the locked chest's mechanism and the motives of the guests remained a puzzle demanding resolution. Poirot had requested the household gather in the drawing-room at noon, a summons that brought a tense hush to the manor. The guests assembled, their faces etched with unease. Mrs. Evelyn Lacey, her composure fraying like worn silk. Colin Lacey, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Miss Diana Vere, her emerald gown replaced by a somber navy dress, her smile absent. Miss Lillian Gray, her hands trembling as she clutched a shawl. And Major Harold Finch, his military bearing rigid but his eyes wary. Inspector Dawes stood by the door, his constable at his side, their presence a reminder of the law's watchful eye. The shattered glass case, still unrepaired, loomed as a silent accusation, its empty pedestal mocking the festive garlands around it. Poirot stepped forward, his small frame commanding the room's attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and deliberate. "The theft of the pudding dish and the murder of Monsieur Brent are not separate crimes, but threads of a single tapestry, woven with care and cunning. The truth, it is near, and Hercule Poirot will now reveal the motive that binds these acts." He paused, his gray eyes sweeping the group, noting each reaction: Mrs. Lacey's tightened lips, Colin's clenched fists, Diana's raised eyebrow, Lillian's flinch, Finch's steely gaze. "Let us begin with the theft," he said, gesturing to the broken case. The dish was taken during the dinner bell, when all were distracted. The wax smudge on the glass, the scratches on the lock, they suggest a key was made, perhaps molded with wax, softened by a candle. The ruby left behind was no accident but a distraction, meant to suggest haste where there was precision. He turned to the fireplace, where the hidden panel lay. The passage from the drawing room to the orangery allowed the thief to move, unseen, leaving no footprints in the snow. The footprints within, small and light, pointed to Mademoiselle Gray, who knows the estate well. Lillian gasped, her shawl slipping, but Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, mademoiselle. You are not the thief, but you have played a role," he continued, his voice steady. "The bergamot scent, it is the thread that ties the crimes. Found in the drawing room, the orangery, and near Mademoiselle Gray's possessions, it suggests a connection. But her vial was sealed, and her fear is not of guilt but of knowledge. She discovered the passage, perhaps by accident, while studying the orangery's plants, and someone else used it." Lillian's eyes widened, tears welling. I found the panel last month," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I was examining the trellis, looking for rare moss. I told no one, but I explored it once, to see where it led. I swear I didn't steal or kill." Her words spilled out, and Poirot nodded, his expression softening. "Merci, Mademoiselle Gray," he said. "Your honesty clarifies much. The thief learned of the passage how, we shall see, and used it to take the dish and move the chest to the orangery." He turned to the group, his tone sharpening. "Now the murder. Monsieur Brent was found in a chest, bolted from within, a ruby in his hand, a dagger in his heart. The splintered wood and scratch on the lid reveal a trick. A wire or tool was used to slide the bolt after his death, creating the illusion of an impossible crime. But why? To confuse, to deflect, to protect the thief, or to settle a score?" Poirot's gaze settled on Colin Lacey. "Monsieur Lacey, your debts are heavy, and you despised Monsieur Brent for his pursuit of the dish. Did you confront him, perhaps in the orangery, to stop his schemes?" Colin's face reddened, his fists clenching. "I told you, I was in my room. Yes, I hated Brent, he was a leech, trying to rob us of our heritage, but I didn't kill him." His voice cracked, and Poirot saw desperation, but also a flicker of truth. "To Diana Vere," he said, "Mademoiselle Vere, your past with Monsieur Lacey gives you motive for revenge. You were seen near the drawing room, and your wit conceals a calculating mind. Did you use the passage to steal, to strike at Colin's family?" Diana's eyes narrowed, her voice cool. "You're reaching, Monsieur Poirot. My engagement to Colin was a mistake, long forgotten. I was writing, as I said. If I wanted revenge, I'd write him as a fool in my next book, not steal his aunt's trinket." Her tone was defiant, but Poirot noted the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped her dress. He turned to Major Finch. "Major, you are a man of honor, devoted to the Lacey family. You saw Monsieur Brent, as a threat to their legacy. Did you act to protect it, perhaps with a dagger from your military past? Finch's jaw tightened, his eyes blazing. I'm no murderer, Poirot. I served with Evelyn's husband. We fought for honor, not theft. Brent was a cad, but I didn't touch him. His voice was steady, but Poirot caught a tremor in his hand, a sign of strain. Poirot stepped to the center of the room, his voice rising. The motive, it is clear. Monsieur Brent planned to steal the pudding dish, not to sell it, but to force Madame Lacey's hand. His notebook, found in his room, lists offers far below the dish's worth, a ruse to pressure her into a sale. He learned of the passage, perhaps from Mademoiselle Gray's careless mention, and used it to take the dish, hiding it somewhere in the house to retrieve later. He paused, his eyes locking on Finch. But you, Major Finch, discovered his plan. You followed him to the orangery, confronted him, and in a moment of rage, stabbed him with a dagger from the house's collection. You moved the chest from the attic, placed Brent inside, and used a wire to lock it, creating a locked-room mystery to deflect suspicion. The ruby in his hand was your touch, to link the murder to the theft. But the bergamot your palm made, used to slick your hair, betrayed you. Finch's face paled, his posture stiffening. That's preposterous, he barked. I was in the billiard room, as I said. You've no proof. Poirot smiled faintly. The proof, it is in the details. The bergamot scent clings to you, Major, despite your cigars. The passage's dust was on your boots, noticed by Inspector Dawes's men. And the wire, found in the orangery soil, matches one from your cigar case. He produced a thin wire, wrapped in his handkerchief, and Finch's eyes widened. The room erupted in gasps. Mrs. Lacey clutched her brooch, her face ashen. Harold, is this true? She whispered. Finch's shoulders slumped, his voice low. I did it for you, Evelyn. Brent was a snake, plotting to ruin you. I saw him slip into the passage, carrying the dish. I followed, demanded he return it. He laughed, mocked the Lacey name. I lost control. The dagger was there, in the orangery, from an old display. I didn't mean to kill him, but I had to protect your honor. His confession hung heavy, and Lillian stifled a sob. Poirot nodded. The dish, Major, you knew where Brent hid it. Finch shook his head. I didn't care about the dish, only stopping him. I put the ruby in his hand to make it look like he was the thief, caught in his own trap. His voice broke, and Dawes stepped forward, his face grim. Major Finch, you're under arrest, Dawes said, signaling his constable. Finch stood, his head high, and allowed himself to be led away. Poirot turned to the group, his voice soft. The murder is solved, but the dish remains. Brent hid it, and we must find it. His eyes gleamed, knowing the final piece of the puzzle was near. Chapter 10. The Confrontation. The drawing room of Kingsless Hall, bathed in the cold light of Christmas morning, stood as a silent witness to the unraveling of a deadly mystery. Major Harold Finch's confession to the murder of Mr. Arthur Brent had left the household reeling, the air thick with shock and the bitter temps of betrayal. The ruby-encrusted pudding dish, however, remained missing, its absence a lingering wound in the heart of the Lacey legacy. Hercule Poirot, his small frame poised near the shattered glass case, surveyed the guests. Mrs. Evelyn Lacey, her composure cracked like porcelain. Colin Lacey, his face a mask of guilt and relief. Miss Diana Vere, her eyes sharp with curiosity. And Miss Lillian Gray, her trembling hands clutching a shawl. Inspector Dawes, having escorted Finch to a guarded room, returned, his mustache bristling. With the weight of the arrest, Poirot's gray eyes gleamed, his voice cutting through the heavy silence. Madame Messieurs, the murder of Monsieur Brent is resolved, but the pudding dish, it remains at large. Major Finch has admitted to killing Brent, to protect the Lacey honor, but he claims ignorance of the dish's fate. This I do not believe is the full truth. The dish is here, hidden within these walls, and Hercule Poirot will find it." His words were a challenge, and he noted the flicker of unease in Colin's eyes, the tightening of Diana's lips. He stepped toward the fireplace, where the hidden passage's panel lay concealed. The dish was taken by Monsieur Brent, who used the secret passage to avoid detection. He did not intend to steal it outright, but to hide it, to pressure Madame Lacey into a sale. The ruby left in the drawing room, the one in Brent's hand, these were misdirections, meant to suggest a thief caught in the act. But Brent's plan was interrupted by Major Finch, and the dish remains where he concealed it. Mrs. Lacey, her voice strained, interjected, "Monsieur Poirot, where could it be? We've searched the orangery, the passage, everywhere." Her hands trembled, and Poirot saw the weight of her family's legacy pressing upon her. "Madame," he replied, "the dish is close, hidden in a place Brent knew would be overlooked." He was a dealer in antiques, a man who understood the value of concealment. Let us consider his actions. Poirot's mind raced, recalling Brent's notebook, the low offers, his familiarity with the house from prior visits. He was in the drawing room before dinner, and he knew the passage from Mademoiselle Gray's careless mention. But where would a man like Brent hide a treasure? Poirot moved to the fireplace, his gloved fingers tracing the panel's edge. The scuff on the hearthstone, the disturbed rug, the faint wax residue all pointed to this room as the heart of the crime. He pressed the latch, opening the panel, and peered into the passage, its cobwebs glinting in the lamplight. The passage was his path, but not his hiding place. He needed a spot secure yet accessible, one he could return to later. He turned to the fireplace itself, its carved mantel adorned with holly. The hearth was wide, its stones blackened by years of use. But one stone near the panel seemed slightly misaligned, its mortar looser than the rest. Poirot knelt, his fingers probing the edges, and with a soft click, the stone shifted, revealing a shallow compartment beneath. Inside, wrapped in a velvet cloth, was the pudding dish, its silver surface gleaming, its rubies winking like firelight. Mrs. Lacey gasped, her hand flying to her brooch. "My God, it's here," she whispered, tears welling. "All this time, right under our noses." Colin staggered forward, his face pale. "Brent hid it there. The bastard, he nearly tore us apart." His voice shook, and Poirot noted the relief in his eyes, tempered by guilt. Diana Vere's lips curved in a faint smile. "Clever, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice tinged with admiration. "Brent played a dangerous game, and it cost him his life." Her eyes met Poirot's, and he saw a flicker of respect, but also a wariness, as if she feared he saw too much. Lillian Gray, her voice soft, said, I never imagined he'd use the passage like that. I only mentioned it once, in passing, when he asked about the orangery's history." Her tears fell, and Poirot sensed her remorse was genuine, her role unwitting. Poirot lifted the dish, its weight substantial in his hands, and placed it on the table, its rubies catching the light. "The dish is restored, Madame Lacey," he said. "Brent's plan was to hide it, to create panic, to force a sale. Major Finch, discovering his intent, acted in a moment of rage, believing he protected your honor. The rubies, the bergamot, the locked chests, these were Finch's attempts to mislead, but the little gray cells, they see through such deceptions." Inspector Dawes, his notebook closed, nodded. "A fine piece of work, Monsieur Poirot. Finch's confession seals the murder, and now we've got the dish back. I'll need a statement about this hiding place, but it seems we're nearly done here." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Nearly, Inspector, but not quite. There is one matter left." He turned to Colin, his gaze piercing. "Monsieur Lacey, your debts drove you to desperation, did they not? You knew Brent's plan, perhaps overheard him boasting. You did not steal the dish, but you considered it. We? Colin's face crumpled, his hands shaking. I thought about it, he admitted, his voice low. I was drowning in debt, and Brent kept pushing Aunt Evelyn to sell. I heard him talking to someone, Lillian. I think about the passage. I thought, if I could get the dish, sell it quietly. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't betray her. He looked at Mrs. Lacey, his eyes pleading. I'm sorry, Aunt Evelyn. I was weak, but I didn't touch it, I swear. Mrs. Lacey's face softened, though pain lingered. Colin, you should have told me, she said, her voice trembling. We could have faced it together. She reached for his hand, and Poirot saw a bond mending, fragile but enduring. To Diana. Poirot said, Mademoiselle Vere, you knew of Colin's troubles, did you not? Your past with him gave you insight, and your presence near the drawing room was no accident. You watched, perhaps hoping to see him fall. Diana's smile was cold. You're too clever, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, I knew Colin was in trouble. I heard him arguing with Brent. I lingered near the drawing room, curious to see what would happen, but I didn't steal or kill. I'm a spectator, not a player. Her words were smooth, but Poirot sensed a truth held back, a satisfaction in the chaos. He turned to Lillian. Mademoiselle Gray, your discovery of the passage was innocent, but your silence endangered you. You must learn to speak, to trust. Lillian nodded, tears streaming. I was afraid, she whispered. I thought no one would believe me. Poirot addressed the group, his voice resonant. The dish is found, the killer confessed, but the lesson remains. Secrets, they breed destruction. Madame Lacey, your legacy is safe, but it is the trust within this house that must now be rebuilt. Mrs. Lacey stepped forward, lifting the dish with trembling hands. Monsieur Poirot, you've saved more than our treasure. You've saved our family. Her voice was steady now, her eyes bright with gratitude. Dawes cleared his throat. I'll take the dish into evidence for now, madame, but it'll be returned once we've sorted the paperwork. Finch will face trial, and we'll close this case. He nodded to Poirot, a rare gesture of respect. As the guests dispersed, Colin lingered, his head bowed. Monsieur Poirot, I'll make things right, he said quietly. No more gambling. I owe it to her. Poirot nodded, seeing sincerity in the young man's eyes. Diana approached, her voice low. You're a dangerous man, Monsieur Poirot. I'll have to put you in a novel someday. She smiled, but her eyes held a warning, and Poirot inclined his head. Acknowledging the game between them, Lillian, still shaken, murmured, Thank you, monsieur. I'll be more careful. Her voice was soft, but Poirot saw a spark of resolve. As the room emptied, Poirot stood alone, the dishes rubies glinting in the light. The mystery was solved, the truth laid bare, but the human heart, with its tangled motives, remained a puzzle eternal. The little gray cells, he murmured, they triumph, but the heart, it is never so simple. With a final glance at the restored dish, he turned to join the household, the weight of the case lifting, leaving only the promise of a Christmas yet to be redeemed. Chapter 11. The resolution. The pale sun of Christmas Day hung low over Kingsless Hall, its light filtering through the frosted windows to cast a serene glow on the drawing room. The ruby-encrusted pudding dish, now recovered from its hidden compartment, beneath the hearthstone, stood once more on its mahogany table, its silver gleaming and its jewels winking like embers in the firelight. The shattered glass case had been cleared away, and the room adorned with holly and ivy seemed to breathe a cautious sigh of relief. Yet the shadow of Mr. Arthur Brent's murder and Major Harold Finch's confession lingered, a somber undercurrent to the festive morning. Hercule Poirot, his neat suit immaculate despite the sleepless night, stood by the fireplace, his gray eyes reflecting the quiet triumph of a mystery solved. The household gathered, their faces a mix of relief and weariness. Mrs. Evelyn Lacey, her black velvet gown replaced by a deep burgundy dress, held herself with renewed dignity, though her eyes betrayed the strain of the past hours. Colin Lacey, his demeanor subdued, stood close to his aunt, his hands no longer trembling but clasped tightly, as if anchoring himself to a new resolve. Miss Diana Vere, in a charcoal dress that muted her usual vibrancy, watched the proceedings with a keen, almost detached curiosity. Miss Lillian Gray, her mousy hair neatly pinned, clutched a shawl, her eyes still red from tears, but now steady with a fragile courage. Inspector Dawes, his notebook tucked away, stood by the door, his constable guarding the pudding dish, which would soon be catalogued as evidence before its return. Poirot stepped forward, his voice clear and measured, carrying the weight of resolution. Mesdames et messieurs, the mystery of the Christmas pudding is resolved. The dish is restored, the murderer of Monsieur Brent is in custody, and the truth, it has been laid bare by the little grey cells. Yet, as with all human dramas, there are lessons to be learned, and these, too, must be acknowledged. He gestured to the dish, its rubies catching the light. Monsieur Brent, driven by greed, sought to manipulate Madame Lacey into selling this treasure. He used the hidden passage, discovered through Mademoiselle Gray's unwitting disclosure, to steal and hide the dish, intending to create panic and secure a bargain. Major Finch, believing he defended the Lacey honor, killed Brent in a moment of rage, staging the locked chest to confound us. The wax, the bergamot, the rubies, these were his missteps, revealing his guilt. Mrs. Lacey's voice was soft but firm. Monsieur Poirot, you have saved more than our heirloom. You have preserved our family's name. I cannot thank you enough. Her eyes shimmered with gratitude, and Poirot inclined his head, his mustache curling slightly. Madame, he said, it is the order of truth that Hercule Poirot serves. But the dish, it is not merely silver and rubies, it is a symbol of trust, which must now be rebuilt within these walls. He turned to Colin, whose face was pale but resolute. Monsieur Lacey, your confession of temptation, it was a brave step. Your debts led you to consider betrayal, but you chose loyalty. What will you do now? Colin straightened, meeting Poirot's gaze. I've sworn to Aunt Evelyn no more gambling. I'll work, find a way to clear my debts honestly. I won't let her down again. His voice was steady, and Mrs. Lacey's hand rested briefly on his arm, a gesture of forgiveness that spoke louder than words. Poirot nodded, then addressed Lillian. Mademoiselle Gray, your silence about the passage, it was born of fear, but it endangered you. You have learned, that truth is a better shield than secrecy. Lillian's lips trembled, but she nodded. Yes, Monsieur Poirot. I was afraid no one would believe me, but I see now I must speak, no matter the risk. I'll stay on at Kingslis, if Mrs. Lacey permits, to finish my work. Her eyes sought Mrs. Lacey's, who offered a gentle smile. You are welcome here, Lillian, Mrs. Lacey said. Your honesty has helped us heal. Poirot's gaze shifted to Diana Vere, who stood apart, her expression unreadable. Mademoiselle Vere, you observed this drama with the eye of a novelist, but your silence, too, was a choice. You knew of Monsieur Lacey's troubles, yet you did not act. Why? Diana's eyes narrowed, but her voice was steady. I'm a writer, Monsieur Poirot, not a savior. Colin's troubles were his own, and I had no stake in this game. I watched, yes, because it was fascinating, a real-life plot unfolding. But I didn't steal or kill. Her words were cool, but Poirot saw a flicker of regret, a crack in her detached facade. Perhaps, he said, your next novel will teach that observation without action is a hollow victory. Diana's lips twitched, but she said nothing, and Poirot let the moment pass. He turned to Inspector Dawes, who cleared his throat. Monsieur Poirot, your work here has been remarkable. Major Finch is secure, and we'll take the dish for safekeeping until the trial. Any last thoughts on the case?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Only this, Inspector. The human heart is a labyrinth, full of greed, honor, fear, and loyalty. The clue still wax, the bergamot, the passage they led to the truth, but it is the motives, the choices, that define us. Major Finch chose vengeance, Monsieur Brent chose greed, and this household, it chooses redemption." Dawes nodded, a rare smile breaking through his stern demeanor. "Well said, sir. I'll see to the formalities. Madame Lacey, you'll have the dish back soon." He gestured to his constable, who carefully wrapped the dish for transport. As the guests began to disperse, Mrs. Lacey approached Poirot, her voice low. "Monsieur, will you stay for our Christmas luncheon? It will be simple, but your presence would honor us." Her eyes held a warmth that softened the lines of her face. And Poirot bowed. "Madame, I am delighted to accept. A Christmas at Kingsless. It is a fitting end to this affair." He smiled, his mustache curling, and followed her to the dining hall, where the table was set with a modest but heartfelt spread: roast turkey, cranberry sauce, and a new pudding. Free of the weight of secrets, the meal was quiet, the guests subdued but hopeful. Colin spoke softly with his aunt, outlining plans for a fresh start. Lillian, seated beside a window, sketched a fern, her hands steady now. Diana, though silent, listened with a writer's ear, her eyes thoughtful. Poirot savored a sip of claret, his mind at ease, the puzzle complete. As the luncheon ended, Mrs. Lacey raised a glass. "To truth," she said, her voice clear, "and to those who seek it, like Monsieur Poirot." The guests echoed the toast, and Poirot inclined his head, his heart warmed by the restoration of order. Outside, the snow fell softly, blanketing the grounds in a fresh layer of white. The manor, scarred but enduring, stood as a testament to resilience. Poirot, stepping into the hall, glanced at the Christmas tree, its ornaments glinting like the rubies of the dish. "The truth," he murmured, "it is the greatest gift." Unwrapped by the little gray cells, with a final nod to the household, he prepared to depart, the mystery of the Christmas pudding resolved, leaving only the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Chapter 12. The Christmas toast. The soft glow of Christmas afternoon bathed Kingsless Hall in a quiet radiance, the snow outside falling in gentle flakes that softened the harsh edges of the previous night's turmoil. The dining hall, with its long table now cleared of the modest luncheon, hummed with a tentative warmth, as if the manor itself sought to reclaim the festive spirit stolen by theft and murder. The ruby-encrusted pudding dish, safely retrieved from its hidden compartment beneath the hearthstone, awaited its return to the Lacey family once Inspector Dawes completed his formalities. Hercule Poirot, his suit pristine and his mustache impeccably groomed, stood near the grand fireplace in the hall, where a fresh fire crackled, casting golden light over the holly garlands and the towering Christmas tree. The guests, their faces softened by the resolution of the mystery, gathered for a final moment of unity before Poirot's departure. Mrs. Evelyn Lacey, her burgundy dress, a symbol of renewed strength, stood at the head of the group, her gray eyes bright with gratitude. Colin Lacey, his posture less hunched, held a glass of mulled wine, his expression one of quiet determination. Miss Diana Vere, her charcoal dress, understated but elegant, observed the scene with a writer's keen eye, her usual irony tempered by a trace of introspection. Miss Lillian Gray, her shawl draped loosely, clutched a small sketchbook, her face calm for the first time since the ordeal began. Inspector Dawes and his constable had departed with Major Harold Finch in custody, leaving the household to reclaim its peace. Poirot, his hands clasped behind his back, addressed the group, his voice warm yet precise. "Mesdames, messieurs, the affair of the Christmas pudding is concluded. The dish is restored, the murderer of Monsieur Brent faces justice, and the secrets of Kingsless Hall have been laid bare. It is not merely the silver and rubies that matter, but the trust and honor they represent. This Christmas, you have faced darkness, but you emerge into the light of truth. Mrs. Lacey stepped forward, a crystal glass in her hand, its facets catching the firelight. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice steady and heartfelt, you have given us more than the return of our heirloom. You have given us clarity, a chance to mend what was broken. Our family, our home, we owe you a debt beyond words. Her eyes shimmered, but her smile was genuine, a beacon of resilience. Poirot bowed, his mustache curling with satisfaction. Madame, it is the order of the human heart that Hercule Poirot seeks to restore. The little gray cells, they work not for glory, but for justice. He glanced at the Christmas tree, its ornaments glinting like stars, and felt a quiet pride in the harmony he had helped reclaim. Colin raised his glass, his voice low but firm. To Aunt Evelyn, and to you, Monsieur Poirot. I've been a fool, but I'll make it right. No more debts, no more secrets. His eyes met his aunt's, and she nodded. A silent pact of forgiveness sealing their bond. Lillian, her voice soft but clear, spoke next. I've learned to speak up, Monsieur Poirot. I'll stay, help with the orangery, and be honest, always. Her sketchbook, filled with delicate drawings of ferns, lay open on the table, a symbol of her renewed purpose. Diana Vere, her lips curving in a rare, unguarded smile, raised her glass. To truth, Monsieur Poirot, and to the stories it inspires. You've given me material for a novel I'll never forget. Her tone held a trace of her usual wit, but Poirot saw a flicker of respect in her eyes, a nod to his victory in their unspoken game. Mrs. Lacey lifted her glass higher, her voice ringing out, to truth, to family, and to the Christmas that binds us. The guests echoed her toast, their glasses clinking in a chorus of crystal, the sound mingling with the soft crackle of the fire. Poirot joined them, sipping his mulled wine, its spices warming his throat as he savored the moment of unity. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the grounds in a pristine shroud that seemed to erase the stains of the past days. The manor stood resolute, its red brick and tall chimneys a testament to endurance. Poirot, preparing to depart for London, stepped into the hall, his greatcoat draped over his arm. He paused by the Christmas tree, its lights reflecting in his eyes, like the rubies of the pudding dish. The human heart, he murmured to himself, it is complex, full of shadows and light. But the truth, it is like this snow pure, inevitable. And it covers all. His fingers brushed a glass bauble, its surface cool and smooth, and he smiled, the weight of the case lifting like mist. Mrs. Lacey joined him, her face serene. Monsieur Poirot, will you return to Kingsland one day? She asked, her voice soft. Madame, he replied, if the grey cells are needed, Hercule Poirot will always answer. But for now, I leave you to your Christmas, and to the future. You will build. He bowed, his gesture elegant, and stepped into the waiting motor car. The crunch of snow under its wheels a final note in the symphony of the case. As the car wound through the frosted lanes, Poirot gazed at the passing countryside, his mind at rest. The adventure of the Christmas pudding had ended, not with fanfare, but with the quiet restoration of order, a fitting gift for a season of hope. His mustache curled, and he whispered, Joyeux Noël, to the snow, to the truth, and to the little gray cells that had triumphed once more.